So why am I here? I was the coordinator of the Socionical project, where Roman was also the project officer. And the project was part of the COSI ICT FET Proactive initiative, focused more on theory. And as part of the data collection process, we implemented an app for crowd monitoring. And that app was deployed here in London for the first time during the Lord Mayor's show, and generated, for us, surprising amount of interest from people who were running the show, from application people. And two things emerged from that, and driven by Socionical and dissemination through the flagship, which adopted it as sort of an example of what we mean by participatory social sensing. And we also founded a spin-off company thinking about exploiting it. And over the course of the last year, we had a huge amount of deployments. Altogether, I think something like 100,000 European citizens in 4 countries has used our app. And in the end, after some time, that led to actually the spin-off getting some significant first contract and hopefully being on the way towards doing something. Roman asked me to talk here about the spin-off perspective. And I guess in a degree, maybe I'm the right person to do that, because if you asked me 4 years ago, what is my purpose of life, what I will do one day, I would never ever have said I will be part of the funding of a spin-off company. Not because I don't like practical research. I work a lot in industry. It was just one of those things, that other people do, Bill Gates and whoever, not me. Not me, really. And in the end, through the participation in a FET project, I sort of got sucked into it, although I was not the driving force, to be honest. So what I want to tell you is, first of all, what is it that we built? And rather than spending all the time on philosophical remarks, I just wanted to show you how the whole thing emerged, which I think is a good example to draw your own conclusions. And then, of course, I want to come with a couple of my own conclusions, which I think is good. So first of all, what did we build? So essentially, we built an app. An app, as you know, for events, for cities, today, even if you are a village football club, you need an app that describes what you do. And this app provides people with information about events, but not only, it asks people to allow us to collect some sensor data for the purpose of the management of the event. And here's a nice visualization of what we do. So the whole idea is that you would have a person who has an app that provides the person with the information about an event. And of course, asking the person's permission, you would take some of the sensor data, specifically in the initial phase, just the location, and use that to build something like a situational awareness of the event. So what you see here is a real data from the Lord Mayor's show, where you can see the route of the Lord Mayor's procession, and the color what you see is related to the density of the crowd in that location. So it's actually a very simple thing. In the situation room of the organizers, you then see the event as a whole displayed as this heat map that is dynamically evolving. And sounds like not much, but it turns out if you talk to people who practically run events, they thought it's great. Because today they have like 40, 50 cameras that show them the picture, and they have to think about what they do. And now they have this automatic situation update that allows them not only to see what is happening, but also to select hotspots and to deliver people, let's say, context-sensitive information. And I'll speak about why people liked it later on, and to run it. So that is what we essentially built. People oblige. Those characters oblige very readily in these animations. So the app consists of 3 parts. One is obviously the app itself. The other one is the server part that generates the information about the crowd density. And those are parts strongly related to the actual research in the project. And there's a third part I want to talk about, which is not that obvious, but quite instrumental in making it commercial, which is the back end that was built sort of out of necessity. And it was the necessity to be able to quickly put together apps for data collection at different events. So what you must understand, coming from research at this stage, the project was never intended, it was not an application project that was put together to implement crowd management technology. The whole thing was a research project, understanding complex interaction of large numbers of humans with technical devices. So we wanted to collect data. We wanted to collect it at many different places. So we had to be able to quickly put together things that allow us to collect data. And of course, the whole thing hinged on people's willingness to use our app. So we had to make sure that content is put there that benefits people. So that has been done easily. And of course, we had to recruit the people who run the event. So we had to provide functionality that they liked. And that's what we did, primarily with the notion they had that we want to be able to collect data. And it turns out that this ability to quickly put together applications for new events that provide information to the participants at one hand, and on the other hand, added functionality and management capability to the events organizers is the core of what the company, the spin-off company, actually markets and what it makes a business case. So, that was quick. And I think that the most interesting thing is in the context of trying to find out how to push innovation out of FET. Because I guess what you would like to see in FET is as many FET projects as possible leading to successful spin-offs. So it may be interesting to see how that emerged. So as I said, Socionical was a project in the cozy ICT area that dealt with the question, how do you from a perspective of complexity science, describe the behavior of systems where you have many humans and complex technology that is networked, that influences humans, and that creates, let's say, complex settings. The focus of the projects were clearly on theory, but the projects had a strong requirement to work on real-life data. And I want to emphasize this real-life data and interaction with the real world, because as I will say later on, I believe that is a main component, in fact, that can lead to the emergence of new applications, of things that actually lead to innovation, that lead to new applications. So we said, okay, we want to collect data on this crowd systems, or interaction of technology with crowds. And it's not easy because there are many people, you want to collect data from many people, how do you do that? So the first attempt that we made was that we took a bunch of students, gave them smartphones, and sent them to the Allianz Arena, the Bayern Munich stadium, to collect some data during games and see what can be done. And the interesting thing is, it's been successful and not successful. In terms of getting data that we could use for our models, sending 20 students there didn't provide us much. We had some ideas, but it was not a lot. But when sending the students then, we said, talk to the organizers, do some structured interviews of what people would like to see in the apps, what are people interested in. And that produced something we were surprised, and it was really interesting. So the result was that the organizers thought that the notion of not just providing the app to people, which they have to do to just be modern and hip and in, and you just have to have the app, but actually using this app to collect the data by which they can improve the way they run their event and market things was very interesting. They didn't think about it before. It's maybe obvious to us, they didn't think about it. And also the other way around, what was an interesting result was if you interviewed people who came to the game, they, with all the discussion about privacy, if you told them that there is a very specific purpose for which you are collecting a very specific piece of information, they were okay. What people don't like is somebody snooping on them without them knowing what for and why. But if there was a clear deal, you would be surprised. So we asked people, what would be the functionality for which you would like and would be willing to provide the data? And I think the winner was being able to see in the break of the game which of the toilets has the shortest queue. And the other one, which was in pair, was being able to order a beer directly to where I sit and being able to find a queue where I have to wait for the beer the least time. So, very simple things that make people happy and where they'll give you some results. So based on that, we said, okay, let's try an app. And we spent quite some time, and I was also involved, and other people in negotiating with Allianz Arena, but they have contracts. Bayern Munich is big. They have contracts with Samsung, with whoever, so there's no way to put the app in that. But we were lucky. We had a partner in a consortium, which was the Malta Civil Protection Department. And Malta is not just a beautiful place. It's a very nice place for doing experiments because it's small. So the mayor of Valletta is also, I think, one of the people involved in the university, and he's also involved in the Civil Protection Department. So it's very easy to set up experiments without such constraints. And we ran experiments there. And it was small, so we didn't get that much data, but it validated the concept. It helped us develop the technology. So then we went to the next step, and it was driven by our colleagues at the London School of Economics, who are excellent connections here in London, and Eve Milton Kelly knows a lot of people in the emergency area, and she somehow led us to talk to the City Hall here and to the Lord Mayor's show. And we implemented that app that I've shown you in the movie for the Lord Mayor's show. And the results were extremely successful, but in a surprising way. So yes, we did validate the basic concept of generating the heat maps and got some interesting crowd information. But that was not the biggest success. What totally surprised us was the enthusiasm with which people who were running the show, the real police, receive our technology. So the general expectation we had was that, Eve knows the guys, and they're friendly enough to let us try our system with them, and they'll see some things that they're interested in, but it's mostly, them doing us a favor for the sake of science. But they said, that's cool. That allows us to see what happens to the crowd without having expensive cameras in the dark and helicopters. We have a much better overview interpretation. We can predict what is happening, and we can send adapted messages. We're really surprised how enthusiastic they were, and they asked us for more deployment. And then when, interesting thing happened. So there were two conclusions that people drew. So myself and the scientists thought, cool, we can, collect more data and write some very great papers about that. And then I have a PhD student who said, well, cool, we can do a spin-off company. They want to have it. We can do a product. And then I said, I didn't think about it, but yes, you're right, we could do that. Sounds good. And we did both things. So what happened since then was that we really had a lot of deployments. So there was one in Vienna run by Alois. There was one in Zurich during the New Year's show. There was the follow-up Lord Mayor's show. You can actually here in London download an app that the City Police of London is using. It's still there. There was another festival. As that altogether, if you count people who downloaded the app, you end up with some 100,000 people. But that was actually not in those events. Those were fairly small. What happened is that after the project finished, or before that, what those events produced, in addition to some interesting data, was a huge amount of publicity. So with this app, we are on BBC Click, we are on German national television, RTL, Night News, we are in key newspapers in Germany, in Switzerland, and we are invited to speak at a town hall here in London and in Munich, and it's a lot of people. And somehow this news got read by the Dutch police when it came to organizing this crowning of King whoever, Alexander or something. An important king. And actually, by that time, the project was actually over. But what happened is that by that time, actually, I changed affiliation. I came to DFKI, and DFKI is a research institute that is very strong in technology transfer, which emphasis on creating spin-offs. And they sort of continue running this thing, even though the project was over. And so the police really came to us with 3 people and said, can we use this app in our application? What have we do to do that? And we said, yes, sounds interesting, let's do it. And the interesting thing is that they really were behind it. So the mayor of Amsterdam presented it in a show. It was run in the newspaper. And that was where the big success came. So in the end, in the statistics during this event only, we had like 74,000 downloads. There were 40,000 out of about 500,000 people at the event. 40,000, 10% were using the app. So that shows that there was a huge acceptance, and they're very happy. And what happened then is that they actually wanted to have more. So that was the deployment. Parallel to that, the company was funded, and the person behind it again was Tobias Franke, who put together and the usual team. And that's a picture he made the picture you should make is this one. He was the driving force behind it, and then he took myself and Eve as people who could represent Eve as a social scientist, I'm a computer scientist, so we have meeting with investors. He would take us, and we would be the serious faces, and he's the one who has been driving the company, and he got a friend of him who runs the bank, and some more students who did the work. And actually, I think that is a perfect setup for a spin-off company. So I know some professors who tend to say, I want to make a spin-off company and push their students to do something. I don't think it works well. But if you have a young person who thinks, that's what I can do for my living, and then he runs it, and then recruits willing accomplices from the academia, and then from that is something that is perfect. So what happened next? The company was funded with the usual German thing as a GmbH 1.5 years ago with 50,000 euro of capital, which was put up by people who were involved. And since then, two things were happening. So for a long time, we have been trying to get some venture capital to do what you really need to do to bridge this first gap, which means we had a nice piece of software, we had a system, but anybody who has ever done work in a research project with PhD students knows that any piece of software written by PhD students in a project is not something that you would like to use commercially. So what you need to do is you need to take the ideas, take the technology, take the experience, and it's because productize it. And we're trying to get the money for it and spend a year, and everybody liked the idea. So we got several offers to, willing to give us $500,000. But what was happening is that Tobias really believed in the company. He wants to make a living out of it. And there was always string attached. Things like, they would say they have to have the right to sell the company anytime. And so all those people, they're very nice, but they're not doing it for charity, right? And so it's not good. And then the way it all took off is really that following this deployment in Amsterdam, the Dutch police came and said, yes, we want to continue using it. Obviously, there was no project, there was nothing, so the company was the obvious place to run it. And now it's got not a very high, but it is a six figures contract to do something for them based on what's been developed in the project. And hopefully that is where it starts with and where the company can live. So that is the story. And I think the moral of the story is that you see that something has emerged that was not necessarily what the project was about, but people took it up, and there was a person who was willing to write it. And there were other people who were willing to support him. And there was a lot of luck, and that's how it worked. So what does it mean, FET from a spin-off perspective? My personal opinion, which other people may see differently, but that's the way I see it. So the first thing is, I believe that the discussion about direction of FET, I believe that something like this idea having emerged and having a climate in which this spin-off could thrive and develop is something that was not an accident, but something that is inherent in the way FET is set up. And there are three things there. So first of all, there was the discussion, how should FET be positioned? And the way FET presents itself, I understand FET is that it funds bold, visionary ideas, but in areas, in very broadly defined areas, where you believe it can make an impact. What I believe is even more important is that you have a strong emphasis and being welcome of demonstrators connected to something in the real life. And I really think that it's a very good place to be on this very narrow line between being too application-oriented and being too basic research. And again, my personal opinion, I've seen a lot of funding agencies and done a lot of proposals. And you do tend to have these two extremes. One are funding agencies that are very, very keen on impact, on producing spin-offs, on producing industrial things. And very often happens there is what happens also in real life. If you really, 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 really want something to happen, like in sports, you really, really want to win this game, you're so focused on really wanting it that by doing it, you actually kill the possibility of it happening. Because the person in sport is so busy. And that's what often happens is that if you talk especially about a spin-off, if you have a board of people who review all the proposals according to will it produce a spin-off, of course they come from a background where they've done a lot of industrial work. But it's things that happened in the past. And I really liked your citation that you have. Any new technology is likely to create applications created by that technology. So these are not being seen. And you see the other opposite of funding agencies that praise themselves of funding basic research. And what they often had is anything that you have in a proposal that relates to implementation, engineering, real-life demonstrators will get your proposal killed. Because it should be basic science. And that's what I like by FET, and I think it's been a crucial thing that it supports, is that you have two things. You're not too narrow. You don't constrain people. You say, the field is right, use your ideas, but then confront your ideas with the real world. That's what actually led to our spin-off, right? We had to do something in the real world and things emerge. The other thing that I think is crucial in FET is this sort of culture of flexibility. People understand that if you do basic research, after 4 years, everything that you've done are things that you thought about 4 years ago that you have not been doing visionary research. And of course, there are contractual obligations, there are things that have to be fulfilled, but within those bounds, FET has a culture of, spotting this thing and encouraging them. Like, the app was never in our proposal, but it was covered under data collection, and we were encouraged to do that. So I think that is really great. And the other factor that has worked very well for us, and was important, was this interdisciplinary aspect. So without people like Eve, who is a social scientist here at LSE, connected to political people, that would never have happened. So this interdisciplinary aspect is certainly something that is very important. So that was about praising what is there. On the other side, I would say, the fact that from the emergence of the idea, somebody who said, it's possible, to actually implementing a company that ended up now with having a contract was pure luck. All the instruments that are in FET, the fact that we had to write an exploitation section and we had an exploitation deliverable, and of course we dutifully put the spin-off company and business plans in the exploitation deliverable because of the contractual obligations. But it's certainly not the fact that because we had to think about a business plan and exploitation that the spin-off company emerged. It was something that was in this stage totally disconnected. So what really made a difference for us is, in the first place, it's people. It's really been this guy, it's been Tobias, and the number of lucky things that he always wanted to build a company because his family owns a business. And he came from a business culture. And also there are significant financial things connected. It's not just the 50,000 euro you have to put to make a GmbH, but you have to pay lawyers and investigate things. And he had the money and the will to invest that money together with us to actually do that. Then he had a group of right people in the project overall. Everybody supported him. He found people to team up with. Then another lucky thing was that after the project ended, again, I moved to the FKI, and we continued to work with it and continue to support actually the spin-off. So his spin-off is with us. The FKI prides itself as being an organization that produces spin-offs. And then there was the publicity work, and that was another lucky thing. People from LSE and other people really were very good at dissemination. So I think if you think about all those current contractual obligation and things, is that certainly the need to do dissemination is important. So I don't know how much sense it makes to put business plans in FET proposal exploitation plans, but certainly dissemination is very important. So the last two things, and again, personal take, what I think would have made it, so if we didn't have Tobias, who really sort of took it in his hand and did it, we had an idea. What would have made the difference from things that FET can actually do? What we would like to have seen? And for me, there are two relatively simple things. The first thing was that, again, Tobias, the guy, he really knew what needs to be done to set up the company. He had the money to put up front and all this stuff. As I said, I never thought I would be a co-founder of a company, and even have an idea, the hurdles, you have to think, what do I have to do? They're huge. Maybe there is some sort of a spin-off office somewhere in the EU. I wouldn't be surprised. But it's not. So if you have this the single person, where a project officer could say, you guys have talk, third floor on the left, talk to the lady, drink coffee with her. She will tell you what to do, and she will be able maybe even to provide you with avenues. Where do you get the money to pay for the lawyers and stuff like this? That would reduce the hurdle, because people tend to be lazy in the end. All of us are, right? So you may think about, I may do it, but if the hurdle is high enough, you will not do it. The other thing that I think would have made a huge difference is something like sort of a post-project program. I think you were mentioning this thing. So What we are looking at for the venture capital was not a funding, so that the Socionical project had, I think, a EU contribution in the range of 5 million euro. We're not looking for another 5 million. We're trying to get a couple of hundred of thousands of euro to take the software, rewrite it, make it product viable. And as far as I know, we now actually even applied for a grant like this in the European, in the EIT ICT labs. You do have these productization programs and marketing programs, but then you have to be a member, and you have to understand those very simple procedures needed in the proposal, and a lot of things that need to be done. But if I imagine you had in the FET program something like this, you have a FET proposal. In the proposal, you actually funded a company, write a 10-page proposal for a follow-up, and it wouldn't be much. So if you imagine something, usually it's 2 or 3 partners who are crucial, right? You don't need more than 1 year, because if you take 5 years to develop your spin-off, you're probably outdated. And if you really count about it, if you think that the sum that you would give to such follow-up project would be about 10 to 20% of the budget of the project, and even under the best circumstances, I don't believe that more than 10 to 20% of the project would come up with a spin-off. You end up with something of 1 to 2% of your budget. And again, I think if we had this path that, it may be a spin-off, and then just after the review in Brussels, spending half an hour talking to somebody who can tell us what to do, and then once we did it, it would be like a 10-page proposal, and people said, okay, let's try it. Then that would make a very, very big difference towards the current procedure of seeing this thing, I don't know how to do it, and then I need huge amounts of capital, I need to run and talk to investors. Again, it may have made a big difference for us. Maybe other people think differently. So I was asked to present my perspective. So that is my perspective. And the final thing summarizing my perspective is really this thing, the web and CERN, which again goes also to your points, that technology, you cannot really foresee what creates technology. And I think FET is actually now really good at supporting this sort of things. And my appeal would be that in all the changes and going toward innovation, that this is not killed. That it doesn't end up like many of those projects that are so keen on making impact that in the end they kill the possibility to make the really big impact. Okay, thank you.